If you're just like, oh, I have to write books about Stoicism because that's what my audience wants, then you just became a slave to your audience.
Today's guest, James Altucher. When I did Trust Me, I'm Lying, my first book came out, someone threw me sort of a book party dinner, and James was there. That was the first time I met him. We've just spent a lot of time together, and whose writing has deeply influenced me over the years. He's one of my favorite people. I always love talking to him.
I'm more interested in how I can become a better person, and then as just a side effect of that if people relate to that, then how other people become better people.
The idea that just through strings of characters, which become words, which become sentences, which become paragraphs, and then a narrative, that I could convince someone that they should change their life in some way. Like, the power of the written word is incredible.
I would say writing is really hard to do well, and a little bit of the issue right now is everybody thinks they're a writer.
That's what separates like a okay book from a really good book, or a book that lasts and a book that doesn't last.
I remember I was talking to Robert Greene and I was describing offline something I was doing, and he's like, you've got to write this book. But now I'm having a problem. I was going to ask you your advice. So what have you been mostly up to? Is it like, I know you have a book coming out in October.
Yes, I do. I think it's October. So I'm finishing that. And then, starting to think about the next one.
What do you think is going to be the next one?
I know, I'm just not saying.
Okay, I respect that.
No,
I think talking about it sometimes kills the energy a little.
No, totally. That's I think. Well, it's two things. Talking about it is a way to kind of get credit in advance.
Yeah,
like,
it's like
people
that
are like, oh, it's so
hit.
amazing,
Yeah.
whatever. I try to avoid that. But also, I find that it's very discouraging to me, because if I had my arms wrapped around it, I'd have probably done it already.
Yeah.
I'm still like thinking about it. And so if I like describe it to you, it's going to sound stupid. And then your reaction is going to influence my, like, I'll be able to tell you exactly what it is and what it's about when I'm almost done.
Yeah,
And
I get
if I'm
it.
doing it now,
I feel like you were able to do that before, though, with like you had such a solid grounding with like ego is the enemy, and the whole series of Stoicism books. I think you were able to more when there's a concept that is just really solid. I think you don't have that problem.
Yeah, but see, Ego is the Enemy started as a book about humility. So if you're like, what are you working on next? And then I'm like, oh, I'm doing this book about humility.
Because I'm the expert.
You'd be like, oh, cool. Good for you. I hope that does well. And I'd be like, it wasn't until I was like midway through it that I figured it out that it was about ego, and I nailed that. So I usually like just don't talk about it until it's like well underway and it exists.
I think that's good. Like, I think, I wrote 1 to 2 books a year from 2003 to 2021.
Yes.
So this is like the first time as an adult that I haven't written a book in a couple of years.
Do you feel backed up?
Very much so. But I think you have to be true to yourself. You can't write a book for the sake of writing a book.
Definitely
That's how
not.
bad books are written.
You've always seemed to me as someone who is compulsively creative. Like, I thought when you were doing your comedy stuff, I saw that as like, oh, actually, social media, writing online, and doing books, James is like, no, he's just having to mainline it like directly from the source. Like we were like trying to get to the most unadulterated form of like expression, reaction. That's kind of sort of what I saw you chasing there.
Yeah, and I never thought of it that way, but you're right. In a book, there's a very long waiting time between starting the book and getting the dopamine hit from releasing the book. But in stand-up comedy, you get that hit or not every day. And if you don't get it one day, you just go back the next day or the next hour and go for it. And that's true. And also, it's a very high pressure creativity. Like, I need material for tonight.
Yeah.
And so you have to be writing every day. And you notice this with comedians. Like, even like take someone like Jerry Seinfeld, who's so successful as the greatest television show creator ever. He would say, if you say, well, what do you do for, he would say, I'm a comedian.
Yeah.
Like, comedians are comedians at the core.
Yes.
And ultimately, I was not a comedian. So that's not my core. But for comedians, that's their core. No matter what else. Kevin Hart, more of a movie guy and a production guy than a comedian. But he's a comedian at the core.
Yeah, no, I think you're someone who has things to say. You have a point of view or a voice. And I think I've watched you. I was thinking about this on the way here. I would have started reading your stuff in 2010. So it's crazy to me that it's been 15 years. And I was realizing, like, one of the first articles I read from you was an article you wrote about not going to college or dropping out of college. And I realized that that article hit me because I was still relatively close to having done that. Like that's how long ago it was in my life that I was like, oh, this guy's like speaking to this thing that I did that I'm still not sure if it was the right decision or not. Cause like, I don't know the end of the story yet. Right. And so like you've always struck me as a person who has strong opinions, and you've been trying your hand at lots of different outlets with a whole bunch of success. You sort of succeeded in each one of the mediums, but that you're like a point of view guy. That's what you are.
Yeah, point of view. It's an interesting thing, point of view, because, and that means something different now than I think it meant 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Like now, there's only 2 points of view, and you're either like
what, woke and anti-woke, or what,
or just like, you know, either Trump or anti-Trump or whatever. Sure. And like I have actually like no interest in that. And so then the question is, what's ethical? Like, do you need to have an interest in that? Like I was talking to Mehdi Hassan, and he was like, you need to have an interest in this. But I was more like, you know, I'm more interested in how I can become a better person. And then as just a side effect of that if people relate to that, then how other people become better people.
Sure.
And it's like different layers of where you should focus. So if I focus on, let's say, this other layer, then it might distract me from how I can become a better person. Like maybe how I become a better person by convincing people to have one stance or another when I don't even know. Like Ukraine's a great example. I have no clue other than what people tell me about what's going on in Ukraine. And so I can have a stance based on what people tell me. But then in terms of me then regurgitating that stance, I'd rather talk about what adventures I'm going through that make me a better person.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the traps of our time is that you have to have an opinion on every issue.
Well, and people say silence is violence. So they make you feel like it's unethical if you're silent.
Well, and it's hard because there is some truth to that, right? If they're taking people away to concentration camps and you don't have an opinion because you're really into physics, that you're complicit in that happening, right? And so obviously at some level, silence is violence. At the same time, the idea that everyone should have an opinion on everything all at the same time, you could argue there's also a form of violence in that. Like what we used to have this impression, and this is like a very 20th century worldview, that authoritarian governments were about depriving people of information and enforcing sort of silence or whatever. And now what authoritarian regimes realize is that it's much easier to allow an ungodly amount of information, contradictory information out in the world. And then people just get confused and tune out, or they're able to tell themselves whatever is comforting, right? You could also argue that noise is violence, because what it allows for is people to do sneaky shit, or to do not sneaky shit, but just to do it in such a way that they get away with it. And so I think the idea that everyone should have every opinion all the time and be talking about it all the time is also wrong. There's some middle ground that each individual, and then certainly each person with a platform or brand or an audience, has to figure out the right amount of also.
It's true. I guess in all that you just said, all that's true is the has to that you said in the last sentence there is where I wonder, like, what do I have to do? Like, I'm not obligated to my platform.
Well, that's true. You don't have to do anything, and that's what makes it an ethical choice.
Right, but then that's interesting, though. Right, so there's a line where, of course, if I'm a physicist and that's all I'm interested in, but my neighbor is going to a concentration, I have to speak about that. That I could see. But, you know, I sort of miss, like, 2011 and 2012, because nobody actually cared whether Barack Obama or Mitt Romney won. I mean, people did. Like, if you're a Democrat, you wanted Barack to win. If you're a Republican, you wanted Mitt Romney to win. But nobody talked about it. I don't even I don't even remember election. I remember every other election. I don't remember 2012's election day.
Well, look, in normal times, most people don't have to be political, because there's an Overton window where, you know, okay, they might disagree this way or this way, but there's a sort of a box that we're all in relative agreement that these are the sort of assumptions. I think the problem is what has happened is what we're now sometimes calling political issues are actually sort of fundamental, like, social contract issues. And they're actually like, I think sometimes people think I'm political, and I'm actually not really talking about the passage of SB 112 or, you know, like the name of some law. Like I'm actually talking about philosophical issues, and our politics have gotten so toxic that we're not talking about politics, but we're talking about bedrock philosophical things. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah, I agree with that. Like particularly the toxicity. Like I feel like the problem now is people can't have conversations.
sure.
Like and like I'm pro-choice, but I have a business partner who's pro-life, and we've been business partners since 1999. Like he's kind of in the background of a lot of my business stuff, and we've never once had an argument, even though we've discussed pro-life, pro-choice stuff. Like he adopts kids, like he puts his, you know, his life where his opinion is.
Sure.
And I strongly disagree, but there's no point in arguing because like he's got his view. I'm not going to change his mind, and he's not going to change mine. But I think people have to get along before they can change, you know, have any sway on someone's opinions.
Yeah. I do think a part of it is probably rooted in the fact that what social media is built around is the solicitation of opinion, right? Like it requires you, the fuel of social media is opinion and judgment.
I would say now, but like 10 years ago, I don't think that was the case. Like I could talk about, oh, here's the 10 things I did when I was broke and depressed to kind of overcome that. And that would get attention because people believed me and they trusted me and they would know my story or learn my story, and then they would want to repeat or emulate what I did.
So the big switch, and like Jonathan Haidt's talked about this, but so like they say like social media is bad for kids or whatever. Actually, when you look at the data, it's not like social media has been around a long time. It's actually not like the mental health levels or whatever they track in kids to sort of see this spike. It's actually not like the day Twitter is invented or the day Facebook is invented. It's right when the social networks switched from a chronological feed to an algorithmic feed.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think about this even with podcasting, which I'd be curious to have your take. I'll talk about that in a second. But the switch from chronological to algorithmic, or even what TikTok does, which is switch it even from the social graph to purely the viral graph, right? Is the switch from, hey, I like that person, I want to follow them, to this is what's being surfaced to me based on what the algorithm thinks will be the most engaging to me and based on what other people are sharing. And so it breaks social media from being this way to follow different people or things that you're interested in to being this thing that surfaces the most extreme, the most invigorating, the most outrageous, whatever, right? That's the fundamental switch. And that's why it goes from, people talking about their interesting lives to like sort of all politics, all division, all culture war stuff all the time.
Yeah, and you're right. So and then not only the problem is the algorithm exists as almost as an entity. Yeah. So it's not like I'm tweeting something controversial so people are going to follow me because of the algorithm. We're both catering to the algorithm. Like now people tweet because they know it feeds this giant algorithm monster, and that people then are also preying down to, like, I'm going to go to the algorithm monster to look at all, to feel exciting and interesting.
Well, instead of being a point of view guy, like, here's what I think. What happens, I think I've seen this happen to so many people I know. They were sort of a point of view person. They had an audience. They were putting stuff out. And then they touch upon an issue, or they say something, or they connect in some way. And then they become all that all the time. Right,
which I think is very limiting. Like, I feel like when I began the podcast, it was about what I cared about and what I was interested in. And I keep it that way, but so many, I mean, I've had some drift in different directions, but so many people say, oh no, you will get so many more downloads and followers if you pick one side or the other and you just go all in. Yeah. I can't do it because A, I'm not that interested in that, and B, I don't think I serve anybody. If you're just preaching to the echo chamber, who's actually benefiting from you?
Well, yeah, who has the audience, right? Do you have the audience, or does the audience have you?
Right.
And I think that's what happens.
And that's always the challenge with every writer. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're just like, oh, I have to write books about Stoicism because that's what my audience wants, then you just became a slave to your audience.
Totally.
And the challenge for any creative is to not be a slave to your work.
Yes.
I mean, that's why you see, like...
That's why you got into it. It was for the expression, not to be sort of corrupted and controlled by some algorithm. That seems like what kind of success is it that you actually have less freedom once you've achieved it?
Yeah, I mean, you can argue the brain. There's a built-in algorithm in the brain. I'd say it's like Joseph Campbell's arc of the hero, the hero's journey. And you have to cater to that structure in the brain that appeals to heroic journeys. But that's about it.
You always want to be at your best. You want to be able to get elite performance from yourself physically and mentally. And I think that's where supplements can come in. And Momentous is a different kind of supplement brand, determined to bring trust and transparency to a space lacking both. And that's why all their formulas are designed with human performance experts and are NSF and Informed Sport certified. They're driven by what they call the Momentous Standard, which has become synonymous with the industry's gold standard in quality and efficacy. If you're new with Momentous, they recommend starting with the Momentous 3 protein, creatine, and omega-3. If you're ready to switch it up to a company who is doing it differently and putting you first, head over to livemomentous.com and use promo code STOIC for 35% off your first subscription. That's code STOIC at livemomentous.com for 35% off your first subscription. I'm thinking about writing this article that I was once very bullish on podcasts, and now I'm increasingly beginning to think they're very bad for you. So like, and I think part of it is the switch from a feed-based universe. Like if you think about podcasts 5 or 10 years ago, a podcast is something you subscribe to. It's long form. The ads are pre-sold. So whether an episode does 1 million listens or 500 listens, like you already sold it. It's not sort of sold in this real-time marketplace. It's primarily conversational. And so I thought those are all relatively positive elements of a medium that I think are designed to produce intelligent, good information. Now, what happens is podcast goes from being just audio to also video. 30 to 40% of the people who are consuming this episode will be watching it on YouTube. That's why I have this studio, right?
I gotta just look nice.
But YouTube is inherently algorithmic. So it becomes how the thumbnail of the episode and the title of the episode and how many comments it generates and the watch time, all these other forces are now operating on you as a content creator. And then I would say the other thing is they now sell real-time ads in your thing. So like for people to understand, you plug in this like little chunk of code and they sell ads in that code. So if the episode blows up, they serve more ads. If it doesn't, whatever, they serve less. And so there's a greater sort of connection between content and profit. And then I think the other thing that I'm realizing is that like when McLuhan said the medium is the message, what he was saying is that and Neil Postman talked about this too, whatever the medium goes towards or elicits from the creator or is most conducive to, it shapes the kind of content, right? And so like it's very hard. I think people think that podcasts are good because it has like two people who disagree talking with each other, or it's like maybe people outside the mainstream or whatever. Actually, what I think a 2-hour conversation is really good for is bullshit. Like, I'm not going to have you here and then like hold your feet to the fire for 2 hours. That's like, that'd be incredibly awkward on a personal level. Do you know what I mean?
Also boring.
And well, yeah, sort of that too. But I guess what I'm saying is that what the friendliness of the medium actually allows crazy people and bullshit artists and manipulators and whatever who are good to use the medium to introduce shitty ideas or untrue things.
But do you think that's true for every medium?
Yes, but it's harder to insert outright nonsense and bullshit into a mainstream newspaper
also
than a 3-hour conversation where both people are smoking weed. Do you know what I mean?
And also you have to understand with podcasts, I'm talking about audio podcasts now. You have a captive audience because they're either in their car or they're at their gym. That's where people consume podcasts. And so they're not switching while they're driving. They're not switching while they're on the treadmill.
Yes.
So it's probably more than most media, you have a captive audience.
Yes. And so you can kind of do these meandering long form. Like when I hear people talk about things that I really know about, I'm like, you're not even close,? And so it's interesting to watch people and I think any medium as it develops, there's this kind of innocence and purity in the early days, and then people who need access to an audience get really good at figuring out how to sort of inject themselves into, like, I think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a great example of a person who's just utterly full of shit and probably like literally insane, who has figured out that, oh, this medium is conducive to spreading my type of thinking because it's fundamentally unrigorous and there's fundamentally a captive audience, and you don't go to a podcast to get political or medical advice for the most part. But if your favorite comedian is interviewing that person, now that's being downloaded directly into your brain in a way that I think if he was forced to defend himself on television or in a debate or in an op-ed, it would fall apart. And
it's true, because like I had him on my podcast, and I didn't really know. I knew I am for vaccines, but I don't know anything. I don't know any facts.
Right. And
he knows a lot. And then we were going to talk about his autobiography, but then he goes for 20 minutes on this stuff, and I just don't know how to. I can't respond to. I don't know how to respond.
And you're like, we got 3 hours left or 2 hours left in this interview. I'm not going to be like, well, that was bullshit. You're not going to say that, right? And you're not 60 Minutes or something where your job is to be hostile. It's not an interrogation. And so what it does is I think it enables stuff to spread, or it's an unfair playing field. And so I don't know. When I hear people tell me that they listen to lots of podcasts, I usually go like, I might switch the ratio. I think podcasts are good if you read a lot, if you talk to lots of smart people, if you have other information inputs, and you also have a strong base of knowledge. I think podcasts can be great. They can be additive. But if you're just like a long haul truck driver and you just do nothing but listen to podcasts all day, I think it will destroy your brain. It's bad for you.
What should a long form truck driver?
I think audio. I mean, think about like an audiobook and a podcast sound essentially the same.
Yeah.
Right. But the amount of effort that goes into one versus the other, it's not even on the same planet.
Right, because an audiobook will take you, let's say, 2 to 3 years to make.
And it has to be worth paying for.
Yeah.
It's designed to last for a long period of time. It's been at least edited like the person went over it several times. There was an editor and a copy editor and a legal review. And then there was a process. It's not a perfect process, but there's some stress applied to it. And then what a podcast is, for the most part, is a thought literally coming off the top of that person's head.
Well, I wonder then if what makes a medium maybe useful or interesting in some way is how much tension there is in the creative process.
Yeah.
So your point is, in a podcast, look, we could just sit down and start talking, and yes, it's going to be interesting. We've known each other a lot. Well, hopefully it'll be interesting. We've known each other a long time.
Yes.
We've developed a whole industry around podcasting, but a book, there's a lot of tension. It's like what we were talking about earlier. What am I going to write about? Oh, is this good? Is this bad? I'm halfway through writing about it. Should I tell people? Should I change this topic completely? Yeah. Should I throw this away? It's probably awful. My wife hates this book. And it's this huge tension that it's like a battle for years until you give birth.
Yeah.
And podcast is not that way.
Yes.
So even like a TV show, like you mentioned, 60 Minutes, okay, they've got a whole meeting of 30 people get together and decide, okay, well, who's going to be a good guest? And then you 5 research this, you 5 research this, we get all the notes together, and hopefully, please God, it'll be a good show.
Yeah, and then they have a 45-minute interview that they're editing down and deciding what shots to go here. They're getting it down to a 14-minute piece. The idea of like just sort of unedited, like, here it is.
Yeah.
Again, there's something refreshing about that, and that's why I like listening to them. But there's a reason people like making them. It's because it's the easiest of all the things to do.
But sometimes a conversation's great. Like I did just watch Joe Rogan had on Magnus Carlsen, who's the greatest chess player in history, and Joe, you can see, he doesn't really know anything about chess, but is fascinated by somebody who's the greatest in history at a skill.
Yes.
And a skill that's so culturally significant. And so their conversation was fascinating because Joe is such a great conversationalist and is a genuinely curious guy. Whether or not you always agree with him, that doesn't have to do with his skills as a podcaster and conversationalist.
So there's a reason he's the biggest.
Yeah, and Magnus, who's not a conversationalist, almost by definition, he's a chess player, but Joe was able to get out this stuff that Magnus has really thought deeply about for decades, and that was interesting to me because it is so spontaneous.
Well, then what's the one? Who's the actor that he had on? Oh, did you watch any of the Terrence Howard one?
No, although it's funny, I had never seen Terrence Howard really in a movie, but then I watched after that. I watched little bits and pieces of it, and then I watched Hustle and Flow with Terrence Howard. John Singleton directed, and great movie.
Of course. But you're like, oh, okay, the same medium that's so conducive to getting something interesting out of a great chess player also can allow a person who's clearly bipolar or manic or just like not well.
Love him, but mentally ill.
Like if you watched a not well person being interviewed on CNN, you would turn it off. Like it wouldn't work. It doesn't work in the format. But the podcast medium is so forgiving that it allows a not well person to act like they're well. And millions of people listen to it and they go, oh, he really said something there. And it's like, no, this person should have been politely, escorted to a doctor's office.
Well, and the problem is the millions of people listening are not like just sitting at their homes and then they move on to the next podcast. Then they all go on Twitter and talk about it. Yeah. And you have literally, it's 50-50. These 50 are defending and saying, yeah, he invented Wi-Fi. And then the other 50 is like, no, that guy has a problem. Like, oh, I just read an anonymous person on Twitter and he changed my mind completely. Like that's never been said. Yeah. So, it's interesting in that way. And at the same time, then you get a completely different feeling when you read a good book where there was that years of tension, like, oh my God, how should I sculpt this sentence and this part of the story? And like you said, it's edited over and over and over again. What's the classic example? Ernest Hemingway, his first book of short stories, his very first book, Sun Also Rises. He edited it like 100 times.
Yes.
See that you
there's like 50 endings.
Yeah.
Yes. No, totally. It's all that's there. And I would say honestly, I think most people would be better, myself included, if we like listened to more music and fewer podcasts. Music, you know what music is? No opinions, right? Or if there are opinions, it's mostly about humanity. It's about life itself. It's not opinions about culture war stuff for the most part.
In fact, those songs are probably bad.
Yes.
So like even like Kendrick Lamar, he just did the Super Bowl show and he had this song, Not Like Us. Yeah. I love the song, but I almost felt when he mentions Drake in the song that, okay, I really love the whole idea of the song, but I don't know what your personal beef is with Drake, and I have no clue at all. Like, well, I barely know who you are. But I like this song, and I really wanted to hear good lyrics. Like, you listen now to, like, let's say Led Zeppelin, and the lyrics, how do they even write those lyrics? It's so beautiful to me. And they're also, they're so personal, but they bring up these, feelings in you that are like, oh my gosh, I forgot I had these feelings listening to these beautiful lyrics. How do they write those songs? I don't even understand how Robert Plant, and I'm just using him as an example. There's millions of great songwriters, not millions, but a lot. But they're so beautiful to me, and I practically cry listening to them. And I feel like that's just not done anymore.
Yeah, I think we're too much of the moment and trying to root things in the now as opposed to sort of rooting them in the like kind of fun. Like, what's the last, that Olivia Rodrigo song, Driver's License?
No,
she writes a song. I mean, this came out during the middle of the pandemic. It was this huge song, but she's writing a song about getting her, like the feeling of getting her driver's license. And like, it's a sad song. It's like a poppy sort of like, I mean, it's a teenage girl singing about this. But the reason it becomes this huge hit is because that feeling is such a universal sort of modern part of coming of age. Yeah. Right? Like, I think that the great works of art are rooted in some part of the human experience, even though they're very specific. They are somehow, some version of that happened to me, as opposed to, I think people think of Bruce Springsteen as this kind of like, not political thing, but that his songs are very like class conscious and political, but they're actually about like human beings struggling.
Yeah, and I never feel the class conscious thing with him. I feel like you either buy into this emotion that
Yes.
he's experiencing, or you don't, and it's just emotional.
Yes. Yeah, and the emotions are timeless.
Yeah.
Even though, so he's right. He's changing characters and eras and, different worldviews, but it's rooted in some thing that whether you're very successful, very unsuccessful, big, small, young, old, there's something in it that connects with you.
Like U2, they come out of this violence in Ireland, and Sunday Bloody Sunday is about some this violent historical event in Ireland. I didn't know that when I first heard the song, but I still was able to enjoy the lyrics because the way they're singing, the lyrics themselves, somehow you can relate, even if you have no historical context there.
Yeah, well, it's also interesting when you think about these acts that are huge in non-English speaking countries. Like they're American or British acts, but then they're huge like globally.
Yeah.
So the people might not even know what the song is about.
Right.
And so at some level, it doesn't actually matter what they're singing about. It matters the emotion that they're evoking in how the random words are coming together.
And I always just wonder, like, how that good music writing seems to me the most creative thing of all, because it's literally the one thing where I can't imagine how they came up with these lyrics. And I really think these people are sort of unique. Like, did I ever tell you when I ran into Bono?
No.
So, like, you've met tons of famous people. Because of the podcast, I've met tons of famous people. But when you see someone like Bono, it's like a different experience. Yeah. So I'm in an elevator in a hotel, and he walks in with some friends. Yeah. And they were talking or bickering or something like that. And Bono's just he turns to me and says, look at these weirdos I'm with. And I just said something like, you really got to be careful about who you hang out with. Like, you're the average of the 5 people you spend your time with. And then as the elevator opens and they all leave, and then Bono turns to me and hugs me and whispers in my ear, "It's going to be okay, man." And then he leaves. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. So it's just like he turned like this elevator ride into a work of art, at least for me.
So my Bono story was I was having dinner with this guy. He runs a movie studio, and we were talking, and he's like, "Let's have dinner." And we had dinner at like the Beverly Hills Hotel, one of the fancy hotels.
Might have been the Beverly Hills hotel, actually.
I think it was, okay, so it's the Beverly Hills Hotel, and we're sitting there, and he goes, that's Bono over there. And I go, "Oh, wow, that's so cool." I was like, "He's the best." And he goes, "Here, I'm going to I'm going to introduce you to him." And I was like, "Okay." And so we walk over, and he goes, he knows him very well. He's like, "Ryan, this is Bono, the lead singer of U2. And then he goes, "Bono, this is Ryan. Do you know the Daily Stoic?" And he's like, "No." And then I was like, "Why did you do that to me?" Like, I said to my friend, "Why did you ask Bono if I knew who I was?" Yeah, but you just set him up to obviously say no. And then just sort of all the air went out of the room because we didn't. And then so I shook his hand and left. But so my one Bono interaction was someone setting him up to say that he didn't know who I was.
Okay, so if you were Bono there, what is the way to respond where the air doesn't go out of the room?
Well, Bono didn't do anything wrong. He got set up.
He didn't do anything wrong. Yes. But I'm still thinking how he could have kept...
The politician's answer would be, "You look very familiar. Tell me about it." Or, "Yes, I do. I'm a huge fan." Like, I actually did meet this politician the other day, and someone did the similar thing. Like, "Do you know?" And he was like, "Oh, yes, I'm a huge fan," or whatever. And I felt like $1 million,
Yeah.
And then as I was walking away, I was like, he didn't say anything specific that would prove that he did, but I wanted it to be true. And so obviously I suspended disbelief. And that's what great personable, sort of charismatic people can make you in the moment feel like they see you and they recognize you and they connect with you, even though they're about to do that to the person next to you and the person next to you. And that's a super rare skill.
It's a rare skill. And you probably have had this experience just having a lot of politicians or actors. Same thing, by the way, politicians and actors, I've noticed.
Yes.
You've had a lot of politicians and actors on your podcast, as have I. And I always, when a good actor or politician I'm having a podcast with, I always end up thinking mid-podcast, is this my new best friend? Like,
Yes.
are we best friends? We're going to
Yeah.
keep in touch.
Yes.
Like, we're going to hang out in LA or DC or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you never hear from them again. Or even if you go to LA and say in text, like, hey, I'm here, like you said, or I should get in touch. Like, you never hear from them.
Yeah.
And they're so good at that. I have to, at first I was like, oh, he wasn't really my best friend. But then it's like, you appreciate that they have this amazing, I wish I had that skill.
Well, no, the ability to do that to someone you're interacting with, that's like one elite level skill. And then the way somebody through their art can make a person they're not even directly interacting with feel that way.
Yes.
That's the most elite skill of all. Like, that a movie star can make themselves feel like your friend or your hero, or that can connect with you through a camera reading, a script. That's an incredible skill. To elicit this sort of parasocial relationship is like, magic.
And I feel like you could tell when they don't have that skill.
Yeah.
You could tell, particularly now where we don't just watch things, we then read about the things we're watching. So like you get this third layer of analysis, whether it's a politician speaking or an actor acting. But you could tell, oh, this person's acting. I feel like this person's acting. I feel like what this politician just said was not true, was not something they believe. But the really good ones, you cannot tell whether this is them or this is them reading a script.
Yeah, there's no sort of artifice, and it just feels natural. And then the part of it where you willingly suspend disbelief and allow yourself to enter the world or the mood or the story. And by the way, it's not just this is like what demagogues do, right? This is what like bad leader, like, it doesn't just have to be for good.
Which you have to do because to be otherwise everyone's going to say that's a demagogue, like that's an evil person. Oh, Hitler's just evil, we're not going to vote for him.
No, he tells a story that you give yourself over to, and you turn off the part of your brain that's thinking about the consequences or the risks or the stupidity of it or the contradictions of it. That's, again, a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah. But then, like you mentioned earlier, how like what they're really doing is just using their art to connect in such a way that you relate so much, you're like friends with them in your mind. And so then it can be said, writing then must be the hardest of all because you're at such a distance. They don't see anything but letters. And I think the writer does feel it, like, I'm having this experience that probably, or it's almost like maybe a survivorship bias, but you write about your experience, and if it's something that's relatable to enough people, you really do make that connect. If you have the skill of writing, it underlies all these things. You need the actual artistic skill through practice, experience, maybe a little bit of talent, and then you come up with a story that's either true or not true, but it's by magic something that a lot of people have experienced, or some people have experienced, so they relate to it or want to relate to it, and they connect with you. Like, I've met a lot of my friends now because they've read my books.
All art is magic, right? We don't really know where it comes from or why it works, but I think there's different potencies of the magic. Like, there's something about music, it's like one note can evoke a mood, right? So there's something just extremely powerful about music. And so I think it can sometimes reach a higher plane. But like, I feel like there are a handful of notes in a song that are more evocative than all the moods that all of my books combined have ever managed to get out of someone. Like,
and does that make you upset?
Yeah, I'm jealous. I'm genuinely jealous of the power of music.
Like, I wish I could have come up with Hotel California and performed it on stage so I could actually see people responding to it. But it's just never going to happen for me.
And like, comedy has something where it's like you're on stage and there's the mic, and then there's something about laughter specifically that's very powerful. I think writing is like, it's kind of crazy that writing works at all. Like, the idea that just through strings of characters, which become words, which become sentences, which become paragraphs, and then a narrative, that I could convince someone that they should change their life in some way, or that they're capable of something, or that I could make them cry, or that I could make them, dedicate their lives to something. Like, the power of the written word is incredible. It's just, I think it requires so much work to get it to do that. And
it's really, I would say writing is really hard to do well. And a little bit of the issue right now is everybody thinks they're a writer because I could write something on and put it on LinkedIn. I could actually have AI write it and put it on LinkedIn, and now I'm the writer.
Yes.
So, but it's actually really hard to like tell that story, and we see so many different examples. Like, let me ask you, so you write these great, amazing books bringing Stoicism into the modern day, and you tell it with modern stories. You know, ideas, I would say ideas piggyback on the stories you're telling. And so you have to be a good storyteller, which you are. But you usually use, almost always, I would say, you use great historical examples that are really worth remembering, and you tell it in such a way that I remember them. You don't tell as many personal stories, and I'm sure you must have been asked this before, and I'm the opposite. When I write, I tend to write personal stories, some historical, but some or most personal. Why don't you write more? I want to know more personal stories. I really love the personal stories. Well, I know you. I want to hear the personal stories.
I would say it is deliberate. In some ways, it's cheating because the historical story has a significance and a weight to it.
History has chosen those stories for you. It's survivorship bias of stories.
And there's a vague sort of familiarity or myth or significance to it by the fact that it existed. It happened a long time ago, and this person accomplished X, Y, or Z. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants or something, right? Like and so I think because I'm trying to I'm already facing a pretty strong headwind, which is that I'm trying to persuade people to be interested in an obscure school of ancient philosophy. I'm trying to use every advantage that I can. I always find it super lame when I pick up a book and it starts with like, so I was consulting with one of my clients, or, I was giving a talk to 300 healthcare professionals in Cleveland. I just find it super lame.
Right.
But do
you find it lame because they're talking to a bunch of pharmacists in Cleveland, or is it lame because it just might be poor storytelling?
I think it's both. I think it's just, my last book was about ethics. Do I want to talk about, me deciding the tip I'm going to leave at this restaurant that I got poor service at? Is that really the sort of the raw materials I want to use to have this discussion about how we treat the little guy? Or do I want to pick a story from history where like a great king was, so it's, I think it mostly has to do with the context in which I'm writing, or what the idea I'm trying to be in service of. If I'm writing a book about marketing, I put myself in there because I have real experience. I think I have interesting stories.
Yeah, right. So that is where you did personal stories.
Yeah. So you have to ask yourself, what am I trying to accomplish? And then you think about what's the best means of doing it. And this is why ego, I think, is a problem, because if what I really want to do is talk about myself, I'm going to shoehorn myself into things I have no business in being in, or I'm going to act like my stories are much more interesting than they are. I think I just decided, hey, I'm more interested in these other people for the most part than I am in myself. But I think in your writing, which is much more personal, you don't just tell, your stories aren't, oh, hey, let me tell you about this like conversation I had. It's usually like, let me tell you this moment my life was falling apart. So there's a vulnerability and a rawness to it that doesn't feel like you're trying to make yourself look good.
If you just say, oh, I'm the greatest basketball player in history, that's going to fail as a story.
Unless you are the greatest basketball player in history, yes.
Right. Otherwise, it's just like bragging. No one wants to listen to that. But I forgot who said it. I think Carrie Fisher said no one wants to watch a movie about beautiful people all the time.
Yeah.
So, but it's a smart approach where the historical stories, it's like a cheat code. So out of like the 6 or 7 billion people who have lived in human history itself has chosen the 50 or 60 best stories. Yeah. And you could just tell those, even that have been told many times before, but you could tell it in your own angle. And everyone, let's just take the most obvious story of all, Jesus.
Yeah.
We know that billions of people think that this is the best story ever.
Yes.
So if you write about it, you're not gonna, that history's already chosen this story for you.
Yes.
Like it's gonna be good depending on your angle. But whereas if you just write about yourself, like you said, it's a very hit or miss. You've got to be careful, and you could have more wider range of reaction.
And I think it's about the medium. When I'm sitting down, and this is my point about books versus some of the other ways. If I'm sitting down and writing a book that I'm going to try to make a very difficult argument that I want you to pay for and then give hours of your life, I'm going to pick the best, most interesting representations of that idea. If I'm shooting this shit on a podcast, I'll talk about myself. Or if I'm doing a social media video, or if I'm writing an article that I'm going to send out to my emails, those are very different. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like I remember when maybe this was 2016 or it was right before the 2016 election, you wrote an article about you and your dad having a political disagreement, and we did an entire podcast about just that article. That was interesting to me because you're someone I read and pay attention to, and how you dealt with this disagreement with someone very close to you who you love, that's something that everybody goes through that, and it's interesting. And so I want, as opposed to you writing about, Dwight Eisenhower had a disagreement with his dad and this is how they resolved it. Like, some categories are more interesting to be personal.
No. And I think I learned from Robert that even when you're picking historical stories, you have to be super selective. And just because you know this one doesn't mean it's the best one. And so I just try to go like, hey, here's the argument that I'm trying to make. What is the best way to illustrate that or persuade people of that? And you have to sort of do that work. And that's what separates like a okay book from a really good book, or a book that lasts and a book that doesn't last.
I think that's true. And it's more particularly interesting now that because books aren't lasting as long now. Like, people don't really read Hemingway anymore for pleasure. I mean, I will, but I also grew up on classic books, so maybe that's why. But I feel like the next generation, certainly the generation after that, when it exists, will not read Hemingway as much for pleasure.
I don't know. I would be curious what the sales say. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they're basically stable.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question, like related to what we were just talking about. Is Jesus a Stoic?
Well, what's interesting is St. Paul, his disciple, studies the Stoics in Tarsus, and then he's when he gets arrested and he comes before this Roman judge, that judge is Seneca's brother. So
really?
Yeah. So these things are like, I do every Christmas, I do this email, and I go like, he was born in a province of the Roman Empire. He speaks and writes about philosophy. It reaches, in millions of people. He talks about like loving your brother. He talks about treating people with kindness. He talks about, controlling your desires. I sort of go through all the sort of philosophy of it. And then, I go, obviously I'm talking about Jesus, right? He's put to death by the Roman state. He goes bravely. He doesn't hold any regret. And I go, no, actually I'm talking about Seneca, because they have almost the exact same story. They're born in the same year in different parts of the Roman Empire. And they come at odds with the sort of sovereign power, and then are forced, in their dying, they're given this sort of ultimate test of their philosophy, which is like, do they disavow it upon pain of death? And so I think what's interesting to me, sort of studying and writing a lot about that period, is it sort of changes my opinion on the Bible, because like, you read the Bible and there's parts of it that make sense, and then parts of it you're like, what is this, right? This is weird and strange, and why don't they just say what they mean? And then if that's the only book of ancient literature you could go, oh, that's just how they were back then. And then you read Seneca or any of the Stoics or Socrates, and they're just normal people talking about regular life. They're not speaking in riddles. They don't claim to hear voices, and you go, oh, actually, like, Jesus was weird. And it's very discordant, and it makes it harder for me to appreciate that message in some ways. In other ways, I appreciate it more, but I go, this isn't the only philosopher talking about this stuff. There were other people who are much more accessible, much less mystical, maybe even more helpful to people. And we went with this other myth instead. I've always found that strange.
I wonder if it's because back then, Stoicism, to let's say what was the Greek religion, but we now call Greek mythology, there was a distance of many centuries from the beginnings of the Greek religion to Stoicism. So maybe people were kind of like, okay, those are good stories, but what else?
Yeah.
And I feel like now in modern society, now of course there are a lot of literalists who take the Bible literally,
Yeah.
but probably most people are secular and they believe in turn the other cheek, but they don't necessarily believe in every miracle and
Yeah.
so on. So I wonder if now we're at that point where religion needs to be more philosophical because it's hard to take it literally. And maybe back in 0 AD, people like Seneca were similarly, okay, well, obviously Zeus doesn't create all the lightning storms, and I need to understand what the actual philosophy is here.
What's also weird, so Hadrian has this like boyfriend lover who drowns in the Nile River or something, right? And he's so bereft and full of grief that he like sets up this temple and this cult to his, he like anoints him as a god, and they set up this cult that worships like his dead boyfriend. And it becomes like enormously popular, like rivaling Christianity in the early days.
Well, who was it? I never heard of
forgetting his name, but yeah, the point is you never even heard of it. This was just like a thing that happened, which is like these different cults or different sort of adherence to these different deities or figures would sort of take on popularity. And then some of them kept going and some of them didn't. And so I always think that's interesting that like we just sort of choose which ones. Thousands of years later, it seems like it all makes sense. But at some point, it was kind of a new thing.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see why different things survive. Like why did Judaism and then Judeo-Christianism survive?
Yeah.
Like it was just the Israelites were just one tribe of people in Israel, and they were all just like fighting it out.
Yeah.
And I guess around 900 BC, for a brief period, for several hundred years, the Israelites won. They won all the battles, killed all the other people, and then they wrote down about their God.
Sure.
And that's the one. Then they were invaded, and only one small group, the Judea, the Jews, lived and survived and organized, and somehow that group became everything.
Yes.
And so it's interesting. And like you say, though, every tribe, there's thousands of tribes that we never know about again.
Yes.
So like what happened?
Or like the Odyssey is the myth that survived, right? Somebody wrote that one down. It was an oral tradition that somebody wrote down. And then it's not just that they wrote it down and it survived, it's that it maintained its popularity for 2,000, 2,500 years or whatever, right? Like we only discovered Gilgamesh, which is a similar epic myth, also really interesting, also a foundational cultural idea for a group of people. But it was basically lost until the 1850s. So it's only had 150. It's not that it's however old that it is. It's however old it is and has remained in circulation, right? So it's that we've been telling and retelling, like Matt Damon's going to star in the Odyssey, and Christopher Nolan's
Which is a bad choice. Christopher Nolan is great, but okay.
But we've just been retelling this story for thousands of years in every medium possible, right? And so it's not that it's old, it's that it's perpetually made new that's made it so powerful. Whereas Gilgamesh, for 2,000 of the years, was obscured and unknown. And then for the last 150 years, some people have been reading it.
I wonder though if it's, I mean, I would say Gilgamesh is less a story about survival than, Odysseus and Jesus and Buddha, and
it's still the hero's journey. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that because school children weren't taught Gilgamesh from the year 1 to the year 1850.
Yeah.
Is why it's not as culturally salient. It's not that it's better or worse. It's just it wasn't told and retold and retold and told and retold and reinterpreted and mean something new to each generation. It missed 18 generations.
But then I see, so then take your books on Stoicism. They are using this idea of what you just described, which is, okay, how do I take this beautiful philosophy that you personally believe in and bring it into a modern context so perhaps it is taught, and so that it does at least bridge from this generation to the next. And you tell these modern stories, like here's Harry Truman, here's John McCain, and you kind of, and by the way, which are good choices because you have Democrats, Republicans, you're kind of neutral there, and you bring these stories together to tell this talk about this philosophy, which really is a modern philosophy. It just previously has been told in these ancient ways. Like, it's not that obscure, the idea of being a virtuous person and overcoming hardship and doing things. But let's stop saying it in terms of Socrates, taking hemlock, and let's put it in terms of, a prisoner of war in the Korean War and so on.
Yeah. I'm trying to take the ideas and illustrate them and demonstrate them and put them up for discussion, which is what philosophy is supposed to be, but sort of isn't anymore. And so, you're supposed to agree with some of the stories, disagree about some of the stories, raise different questions. Well, what about this? Or, okay, Rockefeller is interesting here, but isn't he also a shitty person? It's supposed to generate those kinds of questions. It's not supposed to be definitive.
Which Robert Greene is like such an expert at, like,
best.
Because he'll take all these historical stories, some you know, some you don't, and when you don't know them, you're like, oh my God, Shi Shu was the empress of China in 400 BC, and there was a war, and like all these stories that are so you get this sense that he is such an amazing historian, but then he's bringing it into discussing these laws of power, but then there's the opposite side of each story, like the opposite of each law of power, which also could apply. It's just his books are genius.
Well, the big breakthrough moment for me when I was Robert Greene's research assistant is so he talks a lot in the 48 Laws of Power about the Peloponnesian War and what predates it, obviously. I was curious. He has this great chapter in the 48 Laws of Power on the Battle of Marathon. And I messaged him, or I saw him one day, and I said, Robert, what book did you read to write about the Battle of Marathon? And he recommended some book by some academic. And I went and I read it. And so I read his thing. And then I went and I read this, big book about it. And then when I finished it, I saw what he did. Like, I saw how this book became these pages. And Brian Koppelman talks about like the moment you realize you can do it or how it works. That was just like a huge breakthrough moment in my career and my understanding of sort of history and writing, where I saw the finished product and then the source material. And I just realized, like, that's the magic trick. It's not actually magic. This is how the magician does it.
So what was the bridge between the source and the
I think there was even, I saw how like these 5 sentences became 1 sentence, or that Robert read this, like this academic studied this thing for 30 years and Robert Greene read it. He had a take on what this guy's sort of historical explanation, and Robert reduced it all down to this very specific lesson. And then he used the raw materials to tell that story in a way that demonstrates that lesson in a couple paragraphs. And that's basically the same magic trick that I do in my book. I have a story about Lincoln in my new book, and I thought I'd already read a lot about Lincoln. And I went down to write it, and I realized it didn't have the material that I needed. And so I went and I probably cumulatively read 10,000 pages on Lincoln. And that is maybe a 7,000 word chapter in the book. And so
in this coming book, this next book.
Yeah. So 10,000 pages to 7,000 words. That's
7,000 words is still a lot. I mean, it's 20 pages or so.
Longer than I normally do. But yeah, the process of going, like, I stacked all the books up. It's like taller than me, like from the floor to much taller than me. And what I was looking for is the sort of essence of, like, not Lincoln, every biographical detail and every place and thing that he ever said, but the argument I was making about Lincoln as this sort of man who fused both sort of pragmatism and wisdom and understanding of human nature with also this sort of aspiration, this sort of belief in something better. That's what I was trying to get at. And I had to go consume all this material to get the pieces that I wanted to make, to take the reader on a journey from here to here. And that's reading this book that Robert recommended and seeing that that's how it became 2 paragraphs. I just did that's what I do every day, is I am reading and finding and developing stuff, and then, trying to put it in some form or some story. But that's the magic trick.
And it's not that easy, because you always have to have a unique take.
Yeah.
Like, if it's not unique, then no one should read your book.
Sure.
So like, and Robert does it very well. You do that very well. It's even though it's a cheat code to take these historical stories that have survived, it's to turn it into your own story about this person is still very a difficult skill.
Well, every writer or every sort of filmmaker or whatever has like their sort of thing. Like, it's very clear to me that what Michael Lewis does is he finds characters. Like, he wants to write about the financial crisis, but he doesn't sit down and tell you about the financial crisis. He finds a handful of weirdos who are his way in, or he doesn't want to talk about a pandemic. He talks about, you know, a bunch of different public health officials. He has an idea for a story he wants to tell, and then he doesn't start until he finds the people, right? And you have to, so that's his thing. He's a character driven. His magic trick is he finds a group of people who you and I would probably not think are that interesting or pass right over. His skill, what he's honed over tens of thousands of hours, is like he can identify who those characters is. He wants to talk about football. He finds the story of the blindside kid and how that position in football explains everything. And that's his genius. Malcolm Gladwell is, you know, he finds sort of counterintuitive scientific research, and then he finds stories that illustrates but every person kind of has their thing.
And Michael Lewis is interesting because his first book, which arguably might be his best book, it's hard to decide, but I loved his first book, Liar's Poker, is about him. That is the personal story.
Yes, that's it's less character driven, but all the other guys are these weird maniacs.
Yeah.
He's more of a character in that book, but he's kind of he's more the Nick Carraway of that book. He's not actually like Nick Carraway is not the main character of The Great Gatsby. He's looking up at Gatsby, and that's what Liar's Poker is.
Yeah, that's true. I enjoyed Liar's Poker, but it inspired a generation of people to like work on Wall Street.
To do the opposite of what he was trying to say.
Yeah, even though he portrays the worst kind of world in Liar's Poker, it's like everyone reads that, then that's it, I'm working on Wall Street.
I gave a talk at this thing yesterday, and this guy came up to me, and he was like, I read your book, Trust Me, I'm Lying. It's changed my life. It's why I got into marketing. And I was just like, that exact thing. Like the opposite of what I was trying to do in that book.
Well, I guess it's because it's a fascinating world and subculture. Like all of these books also, their characters exist in cultures, but really more in subcultures, which exist in cultures. Yeah. And so the Trust Me, I'm Lying describes this magic. And so this is it's your first book, right? Yeah. Trust Me, I'm Lying. I mean, it just came, that's how I met you. It came out.
We had a dinner for that.
Yeah,
book.
The dinner for the day the book was published, or the week the book was published. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was sitting next to you. You said to me, you said to me about my writing. You said it's like you came out of nowhere. You just started writing, and I felt it was like you came out of nowhere because it was your first book that just was getting published. So, but Trust Me, I'm Lying also portrays this subculture of marketing where there is this group of guys like what you started out as an 18-year-old who somehow know or are creative enough to figure out these tricks almost to, inspire thousands or millions of people to do something. Oh, I'm going to buy an American Apparel shirt, or I'm going to buy, Tucker's book or whatever. So all the fascinating stuff you've worked on. So
are you going to do one more book, you think?
Well, okay, here's a question. This is, I remember I was talking to Robert Greene and I was describing offline something I was doing. And he's like, oh my gosh, this is the best book. You've got to write this book. But now I'm having a problem. I was going to ask you your advice. So I was good at something as a kid and I stopped doing that thing for 30 years almost. And now I'm trying to be good as an adult. So it's chess. I was a chess master as a kid.
Chess, right?
Yeah. And I stopped playing for 30 years. And during that 30 years, I became successful in a lot of other ways. But of course, if you're not doing something at all, you lose ability. Sure. And it's a very hard game. Like it requires thousands of hours of discipline to even get as good as I was, let alone someone who's a professional player. But I'm trying now to get the same kind of ranking that I had back then. And you would think it doesn't matter your age. Yeah. But somehow it does. Sure. And the interesting thing is, because I've now had success in other areas and my life has built up, okay, now I've had, dinner with Magnus Carlsen. I've been friends with Gary Kasparov, like all these people who are my heroes,
Yeah.
you know, all throughout, I could be part of their culture in ways that I couldn't as a kid. But at the same time, I'm just not, no matter how much I study, discipline myself, you know, work on this, get advice from people like Carlson or Carlson's coach or whoever, I'm not able to achieve. It doesn't seem like I'm going to be able to achieve.
That seems like that should be the book. If the book ends with you becoming a flawless chess player who like, I don't even know if people would believe it. I think it should be. There's something about the struggle and then ultimately the falling short and the sort of bittersweetness of you got as close as you could, but some moments are lost forever. I think that's the struggle and the relatability and the essence of the book. Do you know what I mean? If you could just stop what you're doing and become an Olympic swimmer at age 70, like who's actually going to do that, and who actually could do that? Like that's not the coming back to the thing that you used to love and getting really good at it and learning from it, but also the pain of having lost 30 years of it and the new appreciation. That's all what makes it relatable, because most people can't just go back and give everything to an old hobby anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that should be part of it.
The very next time I spoke to Robert Greene after that, he said, "You got to write a book." I said, "I can't. I have no ending for this book. I failed."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Are you kidding?" You know, you can imagine the way he talks. He's like, "Are you kidding me?" You know, you did it. What are you going to be like? Back to turn yourself back to an 18-year-old again? Of course not. You did it. But I don't really know what that means.
No, I think that is the ending. The ending is life, not a Disney movie.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like when you're working on a project, you need like a comp title. You need something that's like similar, but that's different enough that it doesn't feel like somebody already did it. There's this historian, her name is Nell Painter. And she's a historian of like sort of African-American life. And anyways, she wrote this book called Old in Art School about her after she's like the peak of her profession. She's done everything she could just sort of live out her life as as just a professor emeritus, sort of person. And instead she retires as a historian and she goes back to art school. And the book's called Old in Art School. And it's about her doing something similar to chess, but also different than chess. And like, what makes a good painter, right? Like, but she's deciding not just to be an old person who paints for fun, but to like be rigorous and serious about the thing, and to go back and get the education and the basis and the skills that she never seriously pursued before. And then to also, be humbled by the fact that she's this established person starting over as a beginner in a new field. And it's a really interesting book. I think you would like it.
I'm definitely going to read it. But what's interesting to me there too is that she put the word old in the title.
Yeah.
So I never realized I always thought I was young. I always think of myself as young. That's why I would go up in a comedy club. I didn't even think twice about starting to do stand-up comedy, even though it's a young person's game.
Sure.
But somehow in the past few years, doing this chess stuff, I realized, oh, this is the problem. I'm old.
Yes.
Like, they're young and I'm old, and that's actually the main problem.
Yeah.
It's like if I was trying to play basketball again or something, like, oh, I can't do it. I can't jump. So,
well, like when I met you, I was a kid, right? And I was like, that was my identity was partly rooted in the fact that I was always the youngest person in every room. And now I have some gray hairs and I'm not, and I've been doing this thing a long time. And you just realize you sort of take for granted parts of your identity that are actually not stable, that they're changing and the world is changing around you. Think about how relatable that is though for the reader, because
that's a really good point.
Most people reading your book are old in the sense that they're not 20.
Yeah.
Right? They're having some reckoning with that. Like LeBron James is like one of the last athletes that started when I was a kid. You know what I mean? And like, so there's this part of life where just all the things from a period in your life, they seem stable, but actually day to day, they're dying and falling off. And then you have these sort of wake up call moments and you go, oh, that's like Seneca tells this story about returning to his childhood estate. And, it's in terrible shape. Like these trees are dying and, he calls up the overseer, and he's, you're not taking care of this place. And the overseer is like, do you not recognize me? Like, I was a kid when you were a kid here. We're both old now. And he's like, these trees are dying not because they're not taken care of. They're dying of old age. This is how the lifespan of these trees. And it's in this moment that Seneca realizes he's old, and the same process is happening to him. I just had this same experience. I checked into this hotel in Boulder that I realized I gave one of my first ever talks to. And I didn't realize that till I was walking down the hall. And the first thought I had is, this hotel is really going to shit. And then I realized, no, this hotel was nice when I was here last. And it's been 15 years. Like, and then I thought, oh, like, I'm beat to shit too.
Yeah,
like
that is the experience. Like, and I had never felt that before. It really was a wake up call, like in every way, like the way my brain works, the way my health works, my response to winning or losing, like everything has aged.
Yeah.
And I never had that experience before. I always felt like, oh, I've avoided aging somehow. And now I realized, A, everyone's younger.
Yeah.
And B, oh, I just made a move. I remember thinking when I was a kid playing my dad, oh, I would think he just made an old man move. Yeah. Now I just made that same type of move.
Yes.
And it's just gross.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, what do I do to stop it? I'm going to completely stop drinking alcohol. That'll help. I'm going to make sure I sleep 8 hours a day and follow all the Andrew Huberman advice about sleeping 8 hours a day. I'm going to, work out more. I'm going to be more disciplined about studying and the types of games I play and tournament selection. And so you do all these things because you're older, but it's still, and more, but it still doesn't help. You're
just arresting the decline. You can't actually get back. You can just slow the process. And realizing that you used to be able to get away with not bringing 100% of yourself to something. And then now if you're not at your A game, you suck.
Yeah. And they all know that. Yeah. Right, because it's a very competitive game, and so it's a safe way to practice war.
Yeah.
So, and these younger people they will kill you in an alley, like if they could. So it's like they know, oh, just keep this guy going till the 4th hour of play, and he's just gonna
fall apart.
Yeah, which is what happens.
Yeah.
So unless I win, I mean, I'm not saying I'm horrible. I'm just saying I can't get back to where I was.
No, you have to have a certain amount of self-awareness about this, or obviously, this is what we just went through with the last president. If you're not aware of your decline as it's happening, and you're not able to mitigate it, and you're not able to compensate for it, and you're not able to ultimately know what your limitations are, you'll find yourself in an impossible situation. And
you also have to know what sort of areas of life benefit with age as opposed to decline. Because I would say most things decline. But for instance, I was talking to Arthur Brooks, who's written a lot about this topic. Mm-hmm. The peak age, of course, for mathematicians in their 20s, like 25 years old. But the peak age for a historian is 69 years old.
Right.
Because
you've lived through history now.
Yeah, you've lived through history. And you know how to you don't have to come up with original ideas, but you're really good at connecting old ideas.
Yeah.
So you could say, oh, this experience in COVID is like this other experience during the Great Depression.
Yeah.
So younger people can't synthesize these ideas.
You have a larger cumulative base of knowledge. You have these sort of cumulative advantages in some ways, and then you have cumulative disadvantages in the sense that you're tired, your eyes hurt more, whatever. You have to figure out where that advantage. It's like musicians, you become less cool as you get older, but you actually become probably a better performer because you've done it longer.
Well, okay. Why with every band though? Like, let's just take Led Zeppelin or the Beatles, and they're among the two. Judas Priest, let's take them. They have their
a couple months ago.
Really?
Yeah.
But okay, they're playing their songs from the 1970s, right? Because that every band, it seems, has their 5-year window where they're amazing, they're the best in the world, and then they're never again able to write even one song.
Well, that's what I mean.
Good.
I think being a musician is not just writing songs; it's also performing songs.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like maybe their window, which isn't just raw skill; it's also what culturally you're allowed you know, you only have this sort of cultural window also. It's not like if we suddenly decided to value older musicians, they'd have hits. It's that we don't, right?
I wonder if that's true, because again, I just don't like, I mean, if Led Zeppelin tried to make a new song now, I probably wouldn't like it. Whereas I love...
Yeah, I think it's both. But I guess my point is they might be less great at writing new songs, but they also now have 3 decades or 4 decades of performing the song. And so the show is incredible.
Yeah.
You know, and so what are you optimizing for? You're optimizing for the thing that you're, you know, a game you're unlikely to win, or are you optimizing for the performance, which is less sort of age sensitive?
Yeah, so I guess like the advice to me is, how do I optimize, you know, my experience now involving this incredible activity, given my age, given my, you know, that I probably can't achieve the goals I want to get, but what can I optimize in it in terms of telling this story?
And I think also the question is, do you love being a chess player or do you love chess? And, you know, and so like in sports, it's like, do you love the game of basketball or do you love being the star point guard? And those are very different things. And if you what you actually love is like the sound of sneakers on the floor and the smell of the locker room and the cheer of the crowd and the strategy and the grind. If you love that, there's lots of ways you can participate. You can participate until the day you die. If you love something else about it, if you love it for more narcissistic reasons, then you only have your very brief playing window.
That's the problem. Like, let's put it in a musician sense. Some musicians might like, oh, I like making a platinum album.
Sure.
And other musicians might like the whole music thing. Like writing is a really good thing because you can always enjoy writing, reading, putting together new stories. I feel like writers never wear out. And that's, you know, I'm oversimplifying, but like, yeah, with something that's competitive, like take basketball, sport I don't play, but like Michael Jordan, he clearly loved winning. It's painful to lose. Any competitive sport or game it's really painful to lose, no matter how much you love it. So Michael Jordan, though he managed to convert that into owning a team, and he did play probably maybe a few more years, more than he would have liked, but it's painful to lose.
Here, we need to go in the bookstore because I want to show you a book related to this exact thing.